It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The Apollo program began in 1961 with the goal of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. President John F. Kennedy announced that this would be done by the end of the 1960s decade in May of 1961. Unfortunately, JFK was assassinated before he could see this dream realized. The call to bring a man to the moon was in response to the Russian space program. Since the launch of Sputnik 1 in October of 1957, America had always been one step behind Russia. However, America now had an opportunity to finally pull ahead. The Saturn I rocket was used to bring pieces of the Apollo spacecraft into Earth orbit for testing purposes. It was a two-phase rocket with more than 1.2 million pounds of thrust. It had a 100% success rate in its lifetime. The Saturn V rocket was created as the evolution of the Saturn I rocket. Used in all of the lunar missions, the Saturn V had 8.65 million pounds of thrust, carrying 3 people and the entire Apollo spacecraft out of Earth orbit. Like its predecessor, the Saturn V had no failures in its lifetime. The Apollo spacecraft had 3 distinct sections: the command module and the service module, known together as the CSM, and lastly, the lunar module, or the LM. The command module was where the 3-person crew would stay during the transition phase from the Earth to the Moon. The service module, which was attached to the command module until Earth re-entry, carried much-needed oxygen, water, and other consumables. It also generated electricity for the spacecraft. Lastly, the lunar module was the portion of the spacecraft which would land on the Moon. When in Moon orbit, 2 of the 3 astronauts would leave the command module and go into the lunar module to guide it down to the surface. During Apollo 1, Grissom, White, and Chaffee were supposed to test the systems of the command and service module while in orbit. However, even before the mission could occur, a fire tragically killed all of the 3 crew during a training exercise in the command module. This seriously delayed and almost canceled the program. However, the program nonetheless pushed forward, and in December of 1968, Apollo 8 amazed the world. The 3-member crew was the first to ever leave Earth's orbit and to see the dark side of the Moon. While in the Moon's orbit, on Christmas Eve, they made a televised broadcast that was seen by over 1 billion people worldwide. As if that was not enough, Apollo 11 occurred in July of 1969. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the Moon in the Sea of Tranquility, while Michael Collins orbited above. As Armstrong made the first ever footprints on the Moon, the Earth watched in awe. America had won the space race. Perhaps the most dramatic of all was Apollo 13. An oxygen tank in the service module exploded, and the crew had to abandon the mission. They slingshot around the Moon and back to the Earth alive. using the lunar module as a lifeboat. The final mission was Apollo 17 in 1972. It was a successful mission, and it was the most recent as of 2012 that anyone has ever walked on the moon. As can be seen, the Apollo program was most definitely a success, and it showed how much America can achieve in space if given the proper funding.